Hello and welcome to the newsroom. We're starting with breaking this hour on Jeffrey Epstein files of US. So now US government has released around 3 million, according to media reports, 3 million more files related to Jeffrey Epstein. He has published a new category of files related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, the Trump administration's latest effort to comply with the law passed in November that required the department to release all Epstein-related records by December 19, 2025. However, the December date has passed already, while this comes as when the department has said that the end of 2025 that it still has more than 5 million pages to review and needed to reassign hundreds of lawyers to do so, drawing criticism from some members of Congress that the administration's slow pace had violated the law. While 3 million pages from the Justice Department files on the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein are being released to the public today, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has said that at press briefing today. Blanche said the release will include 2,000 videos and 180,000 images related to the Epstein case. It's the latest in the series of releases that began last month in response to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which passed Congress overwhelmingly and was signed into law by President Donald Trump on November 19th last year. The act gave the Justice Department 30 days to make publicly available all classified records pertaining to investigations and prosecutions of Epstein and his convicted co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, the bill contains several exceptions that allow for withholding or redacting records, notably to protect the privacy of Epstein's victims. That's what the government says. The DOJ to date had posted to its online Epstein library roughly 12,000 documents, totaling about 125,000 pages, just a small fraction of the millions of records the department has been reviewing. Those materials included record of complaint to the FBI filed back in 1996, years before the disgraced financier was first investigated for child sex abuse. The documents also included new details about the government's investigation into potential accomplices, as well as thousands of photographs of Epstein's New York and U.S. Virgin Islands properties that were searched by the FBI after Epstein's arrest in 2019. Now, the images, which were released without any context or background information, contained little information related to Trump, leading a spokesperson for Clinton to accuse the DOJ of selectively disclosing the pictures to imply wrongdoing on the part of Clinton, where he said there is none. Now, both Trump and Clinton have denied all wrongdoings and have denied having any knowledge of Epstein's crimes. We will be eyeing this as we continue to follow this news. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. has announced more Iran-related sanctions. The U.S. Treasury Department has imposed more new sanctions on 7 Iranian nationals and 1 entity, according to an update from the U.S. Treasury Department's website. 4 of the sanctioned individuals are named as having been members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The U.S. already has extensive sanctions against Iran. Yesterday, the U.S. Secretary of State announced plans to revoke immigration privileges for senior Iranian officials and their family members as well. Now we will be following this from our newsroom, and now we move on to our next news. Now we move on to our next news with Iran and US and EU standoff. Today we saw a lot of updates coming in from European leaders towards Iran, and after European leaders, EU has put Iranian regimes, the guards to sanctioned Iranian regime's guards. They have Iranian government has said that they will counter that move by Iran by saying that they will also put sanctions on EU forces as well. Now, IRGC was designated as a terrorist group by EU, and Iran said it will label EU member states' armed forces as terrorists in response to that move, which was done by EU against IRGC. Now, while Arakchi was in Turkey today, we heard him speak and reiterated same stance. However, he has said that if there is respect from US side and EU side, they are open to diplomacy and talks. Now, for this, we will be welcoming my colleague Marisha Bar for this. Marisha, what more can you tell us about this ongoing situation between Iran and EU and US?
Yes, well, Asuma, to give you and our viewers a little bit more insight into what are the recent developments when it comes to the unrest or the escalation with regards to diplomacy and just global ties within Iran and the US, let's take a look at first what you shared before. So the United States has sanctioned almost a few more Iranians to the sanctions list. Now, this sanction has come about with regards to the Treasury Department. These are statements released by the US's Treasury Department. Now, when you look at it in the depths of it, around 7 Iranian nationals and a whole entire entity have been added into the sanctions list. Now, when you look at the 4 sanctioned individuals are also being have been identified as members of the IRGC. Now, Washington already enforces extensive sanctions on Iran and across Iranian economy. Let's not deny the protests that did go on and are still going on in Iran with regards to the failing governance of it. In fact, even through this unrest, a lot of blockage with regards to internet access, with regards to unrest leading to humanitarian crisis within Iran is seen as a very notable stance. Now, when you look at the US's role in the midst of all of this, Washington enforces extensive sanctions across Iranian economy. US plans to revoke the visas of senior Iranian officials and their families. Now, this is where you see global diplomacy coming into play, because now you see Turkey as a separate nation who is involved in the talks when it comes to Iran. Now, Turkey urges diplomatic solution to avoid conflict and isolation of Iran. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan confirms talks with US's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Ankara says dialogue must continue between Washington and Tehran. They are in fact playing a mediator with regards to the tensions that are escalating with regards to the US and Iran. For Iran's Foreign Minister Arakchi stresses that talks must be fair and respectful. Tehran seeks unity, stability and peace. in Syria, because all of these regions are in fact facing escalated tensions because of the unrest that is being rippled out of Iran. Now, Turkey opposes any foreign military intervention against Iran, which primarily they mean the US. Ankara warns Israel, pushing allies towards military actions. Iran, in fact, threatens to label EU forces terrorists over the IRGC ban. So, all in all, when you look at the situation from a global standpoint, the escalating tensions within Iran is being mediated by Turkey and other global entities, whilst US continues to sanction and release fresh sanctions related to Iran against the Iranian government, which includes Iranian nationals and their family members in itself. So yes, Asma, this is what we know with regards to Iran and the standpoint at this current moment.
Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now moving on to U.S. Federal Reserve Chair, the 16th Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, will be replaced after he finishes his term in May this year. He's going to be replaced by Mr. Walsh. Now, Trump has nominated Mr. Walsh to lead Federal Reserve today. So, going to the basics, what is the Federal Reserve? It is the U.S. central bank which operates independently from government with goals of maximum employment and stable prices. Now, Kevin Walsh was a former Federal Reserve governor and Wall Street veteran, which makes him highly capable of this particular chair, responsibility. Now, Kevin Walsh has been outspoken in his calls for regime change at the central bank. In a speech last year, he has also said U.S. fiscal policy was on a dangerous trajectory and that there had been a rise in irresponsible spending. He's seen as a voice that would support lower interest rates in the near term, which of course aligns with what President of the United States Trump has been vocal about. Now he's replacing the current federal chair head Jerome Powell, who was selected for this role by Trump back in 2018, back in his first term, which is set to end in May. Due to his resistance to pressure from the president to cut interest rates more rapidly, he found himself under the fire and often lambasted on social media. He's currently under investigation by federal prosecutors as well. Now, former U.S. Treasury official who worked with Fed nominee Kevin Walsh has told some media reports that people are happy with this choice. Now, for this, joining me is Maresha. For this, my colleague. Maresha, what more can you tell us about this new nominee?
Yes, well, Asma, US President Donald Trump has time and again shown and made his dislike and displeasure very vocal with regards to Jerome Powell, who is the current Fed chief, and considering the nomination of Kevin Walsh, who Trump lauds, he has upfront complimented and called Kevin Walsh as one of the top picks when it comes to the next successor to the US Fed chair. Is in fact a massive development when it comes to the controversy circling around who's going to be the next Fed chair, or who will be leading the Federal Reserve of the US. Now, when you look at it, today, that is the 30th of January 2026, is when Trump has nominated Kevin Walsh as the successor to Jerome Powell to replace him in the coming future. Now, taking a look at the details of it, Walsh is chosen to replace Powell, whose term ends in the month of May 2026, this year. And Trump has lauded Walsh as a top pick, calling him one of the greatest Fed chairmen, as I quote. and in fact he says he is the great Fed chairman, maybe even the best. These are the words of Donald Trump when it comes to the nomination of his choice of candidacy to Kevin Warsh. But let's talk about the background. Who is Kevin Warsh? Now, Kevin Warsh previously served as a Federal Reserve governor back in the year 2006 to 2011. He also served, he was known as the youngest ever at the age of 35 when he served his term. Now, the previous roles, he worked as a former Morgan Stanley executive and is currently a fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. Now, let's talk about the economic views. He is known for being an inflation hawk. He prefers higher interest rates to control inflation. This is his stance when it comes to the rising economy of the US. But recently, he aligned with Trump's calls for lower rates. Now, talking about his professional career, with regards to his educational background, he holds a AB from Stanford and a JD from Harvard Law School. He serves on the board of director for an organization called Ups and Coupang. And he's played a significant role during the 2008 financial crisis as a key liaison to Wall Street. Now, the confirmation of the progress of his nomination truly is dependent on the Senate approval. Now, Warsh needs approval from the Senate but faces opposition. Republican Senator Tim Scott praises Warsh's knowledge and supports his nomination, whilst Senator Tom Tillis vows to oppose the confirmation until an investigation into the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, is resolved. Now, Warsh is criticized for his economic stance. He has been outspoken against the Fed's involvement in politically charged issues like climate change and inclusion, saying it distracts from the core mission of stable prices and employment. But in all of this, what is at stake? For you and our viewers to understand that the impact on interest rates within the US is something that analysts say is at stake, where Warsh's stance on interest rates is likely to influence borrowing costs from mortgages to car loans, impacting everyday Americans and US citizens. Now, since the US dollar and treasury bonds play a major role in global finance, the Fed's policies have far-reaching effects. So even after being nominated, only time will tell, Asuma, if and how the Fed chair convenes the nomination and accepts Kevin Warsh as their next Fed chair. And how does that pan out for the average citizen in the US?
Yes, thank you for highlighting that and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next Rep Live as well, Marisha. Now we move on to US, UK, and now we move on to China and UK. And today, as we know, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is on his visit to China still, and today he was headed to Shanghai. While all of this is unfolding in China and the warming of the ties between UK and China, we saw President Trump raise an alarm towards their warming ties. US has said, and President Trump has said that they should be careful about this, the warming of ties between China and UK. However, UK has said something back. While yes, UK's British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that after the Trump criticism, he has said that UK cannot ignore China, and it would be, I'm paraphrasing here, but it would be foolish of them to ignore China. And while Trump has also threatened Canada with 50% tariff on aircraft sold in US today, and UK has achieved many things this week while Keir Starmer's visit to China. They seem to be ending their ice age, diplomatic ice age that has defined their relationship for the past 8 years. This is once again this visit comes after 8 years of no visit from a British leader to China. Now, both leaders face economic pressures at home and are seeking new opportunities for trade and investment. For Keir Starmer, the first UK Prime Minister to visit China since Theresa May in 2018, the trip was a chance to highlight the strength of British firms in finance, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, energy, clean energy, and car making. Now, President Xi Jinping, meanwhile, has aimed to show that China can be a reliable partner for Western economies as US President Donald Trump continues to rattle the global trading system. Although no sweeping free trade deal was reached, the visit marked a cautious but tangible reset of UK-China economic ties. Now, they have already signed and issued agreements on things like visa services, healthcare, green technology, and finance, combined with revived dialogue that might lead to better access for British firms to Chinese markets and greater Chinese investments in the UK. Now, earlier, we saw UK raise alarms over China's human rights, especially in Xinjiang province, towards Uyghur minorities. However, it seems like they have decided to lift those alarms that were raised by UK earlier, and also China has decided to ease the sanctions which were placed onto some UK ministers earlier, but now we know that they have been lifted. However, UK hasn't done the same as of now.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China. Canada is not doing well. They're doing very poorly, and you can't look at China as the answer. I know China very well. I know President Xi's a friend of mine. I know him very well, but that's a big hurdle to go over when you get Canada.
Now, for this, we welcome back my colleague Marisha for this. Thank you, Marisha, for staying with us. What more can you tell us about this?
Yes, well, for you and our viewers, Asuma, what we see from our position is that heightened diplomacy and heightened bilateral talks with regards to diplomacy is seen when it comes to when it comes to Canada and China, and right now US's involvement within all of this. Now you see nations and countries who come in unison to retaliate or to withstand dominance from the US, from Western dominance with regards to pressures on tariffs when it comes to what Trump is imposing globally. Now, why are these bilateral talks between Mark Carney and Xi Jinping so important? Now, when you look at it from Canada's, when you look at it from the British point of view, when it comes to Keir Starmer's visit, and especially the bilateral between the UK and China, you see why Keir Starmer's visit is so important, because he in fact is the first, he became the first British Prime Minister to visit China in almost 8 years. Now, according to reports, there have been successful talks between Keir Starmer and Xi Jinping. And the talks with Xi Jinping have been rather successful. In fact, Starmer held a 3-hour-long meeting with Xi Jinping, leading to agreements on tariff and visas. Now, what are the two countries looking at? Now, China agreed to cut tariff on UK whiskey from about 10% to now 5%. China will allow UK citizens to visit for up to 30 days without a visa. Also, a monumental deal has also been struck where a British drug maker company, AstraZeneca, committed to investing around $15 billion in China. Talks are also focused on health issues and streamlining export processes. Now, what is the stance? What is the strategy of Starmer when it comes to these bilateral talks? Well, when it comes to Starmer, economic pragmatism seems to be a strategy where Starmer emphasized that engaging with China is essential for the UK's economy, highlighting job creation and new trade opportunities. Starmer insists that the UK doesn't have to choose between the US and China.
Yes. Marisha, thank you for sharing that insight. Unfortunately, we are running out of time for that discussion, but now we move the focus on to Russia and Ukraine. U.S. President had earlier stated that it or requested U.S. to Russia to hold airstrikes on Kyiv until February 1st amid harsh winter temperatures, and now media reports show that Russia has agreed to do so. So Russia has agreed to hold airstrikes on Kyiv until February 1st amid harsh winter temperatures, and Ukraine said it was ready to reciprocate as Washington pushes for a diplomatic solution to end the war. But as the Ukrainian capital braces for another bittery cold spell, from Sunday, President Volodymyr Zelensky said today that there was no formal truce between these two countries. Russia has bombed Ukraine's roads and railways in recent days. The Kremlin said President Vladimir Putin had accepted Trump's request to stop bombarding Kyiv to create favorable conditions for peace talks. In recent weeks, however, Russian strikes on energy infrastructure in Kyiv have left hundreds and thousands of people without heating in their homes for days in end. At times, as temperatures have left below minus 15 degrees Celsius. Now, Zelensky said Ukraine was ready to reciprocate this, halting its attacks on Russian refinery infrastructure, saying this was an opportunity rather than agreement. Now, in a post on the Telegram app, Zelensky said there were no strikes on Ukrainian energy facilities overnight and said that Moscow's focus had shifted towards strikes on logistics infrastructure. Now that's all for Newsroom today. Thank you for watching.